In a lot of ways, throughout our lives, we experience loss and we go through different stages of grief when we experience it. I've gone through loss before and it hurts a lot. But with that in mind, we all experience it in different ways. We're human after all, and none of us are perfect. But in Halo, Spartans are not socialised people and don't have much experience in terms of dealing with their emotions. So I've been sat here in recent weeks thinking about my journey for becoming who I am today and thought about how I dealt with loss, and then I was also wondering how a Halo Infinite story might play out, and that's when these two ideas got fused together. We already know at this stage that Halo Infinite story is going to be focused on the Chief, but how exactly is Chief going to react and play out emotionally throughout this game? Well, in today's video we're going to do some speculation about how the interactions between Chief and Cortana are going to play out, and also where is Chief in the stages of grieving. Find out in today's episode of how Chief's emotional journey will help him bring down Cortana in Halo Infinite.
Ultimate Halo.
Hey up lads, Fletch here from Ultimate Halo, and please support my journey to Halo Infinite by liking this video, subscribing and hitting that notification bell. Let's nail 100,000 subscribers before the game comes out. That is an absolute dream of mine and I'd love your help. Throughout the history of Halo, the Master Chief has always been a shell of a character, and I do mean that in the nicest way possible. He was a man in a suit of armour that was a vessel for the player to embody. He wasn't a fleshed out personality, he was a badass who did not need to say a lot, and over time he started to develop, which is natural under the circumstances that he was put under. In Combat Evolved, the dynamic between the Master Chief and Cortana was mostly banterous. They were friends who had a great bond and stuck by each other until the very end. Then in Halo 2, their relationship was full of sacrifice, strain and risk, which ultimately led to their relationship being exposed in more detail in Halo 3. Now, a lot of people might tell you that Halo 4 was the start of the Chief becoming a real character, to which I agree to an extent, but it took it forward in a huge step. But in my eyes, Halo 3 was actually the first glimpse of Chief showing his emotional side as well as Cortana. Watch this encounter between the both of them and just see how they both behave.
But so much of me is wrong, out of place. You might be too late.
You know me. When I make a promise,
You keep it. I do know how to pick 'em.
lucky me. Do you still have it?
The activation index from the first Halo ring. A little souvenir I hung on to, just in case. Got an escape plan?
Thought I'd try shooting my way out. Mix things up a little.
Just keep your head down. There's two of us in here now, remember?
This for me is a cutscene that I don't think people talk about enough. The reason why I adore this scene is because it shows how vulnerable Cortana is becoming and how both characters are pillars of support for each other. When Chief says, "You know me, when I make a promise," it confirms to Cortana that he's there for her, which then inspires her to get to her feet. She's an intelligent and powerful character, and when Chief presents his chip to get inside, the music, the camera and the movement of Chief presents all the feelings of completion. The puzzle is complete again. This was one of the first times for me when I knew Chief showed his real humanity. He wasn't all run and gun for that one moment, at least not all of the time, but generally he is, but he showed he was a man. When the game ended, we saw Chief go into cryo sleep, and of course, Cortana shows dismay that he must leave as she knows that she's going to be alone for a while. Then throughout the events of Halo 4, you see them support each other in various ways, especially approaching Ivanov Research Station. Chief needs help getting on board, but she also needs help to allow herself to get composed, whilst her rampant fragments cause her a lot of trouble. Then in Halo 4's ending, you lose Cortana, and what ensues is one of the most emotional scenes in a Halo game. You see their emotions gather as they say goodbye. Cortana is clearly emotional and able to express how much Chief means to her, and then Chief just locks up. He's lost for words, and you can tell he feels utterly powerless. Normally the control is in Chief's hands, but when Chief cannot keep his promise to get her home to Halsey to help her with her rampancy, he genuinely just does not know how to react. Then whilst on the UNSC Infinity, you see Lasky try to speak to him to provide his condolences, but Chief just does not seem to respond well at all. Then he says the line that shows the following revelation.
She said that to me once. About being a machine.
It's at this point the Master Chief understands his humanity. He knows that without Cortana he is not functioning, and they're integral to each other's humanity, which is ironic considering they're two of the most inhuman characters in a literal sense. Then there was only really one emotional moment that grabs me in Halo 5, and it's the desperation you hear when Cortana is about to lock him up in a krypton. Then Cortana turns around and you can see her despair. At this point, let's just take a pause, and my question to you is, how does Chief cope with this mechanism? Well, first of all, we need to come to grasps with the concept of grief. If you've ever grieved, you might understand that there are certain stages of this for most people, and it's actually well documented as the Kubler Ross model, which breaks it into 5 stages, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and finally acceptance. Typically, they can be played out in that exact order. However, this is not always the case, and Chief is definitely no ordinary human. I personally think he's already past denial. I think we saw it straight away with the interaction with what happened when he lost Cortana. You can see by his expression, he's like, no, you can't leave, so I think he's already gone past that. Then I think the depression stage was slumped upon him pretty much instantly when he was on board the UNSC Infinity. I think obviously in his interaction with Captain Lasky, that things were just not in a good place for him at that time. Anger is one I'm actually on the fence about. I personally think that Chief is yet to go through this as an experience, but on the other hand, you could interpret the way he was going on consecutive missions after Halo 4, as detailed by the various books and comics, as him really venting his anger that he wasn't able to do this. It was just an expression so he can go into combat and get rid of this anger that's consuming him. It was actually at this point also he was leading Blue Team, and he was pushing them pretty hard, and it's actually acknowledged in Halo 5 in an encounter between him and Fred. So who knows, this could be his anger and just him trying to vent it out of his system, but I would be more curious to see Chief express this in a literal sense, as it's rare we get to see it. Normally he's quite a composed and calm person under an extreme amount of pressure. I think one way we could possibly see Chief be angry is in the way others might confront him about bringing Cortana home, or maybe losing his temper with Cortana for not listening to him, and her thinking that the created are holding the mantle of responsibility and that's the correct thing to do. Then in terms of bargaining, I think he's definitely already been through this. He's already shown that in Halo 5 he's asking her to come home and that he's desperate to get her, even so much so that he was ready to defy orders to do so. At this stage I can only deduce that he's got acceptance to go through. Hopefully we can see some anger so fans don't have to miss every single step of him in the grieving process, but we're definitely going to see Chief understand the weight of his actions and find out a way to stop her. At this point, how will Chief behave in Halo Infinite? We can already see from the opening cutscene Chief's definitely on a mission, and I mean that in a real literal sense. He's going for this. As soon as he is awoken, when Brohammer surges electricity through his armour, he's immediately on the go. He asks for a status report, to which Brohammer looks pretty confused. He doesn't seem to know why Chief doesn't know what's going on. It seems all action for the Chief through this, and it indicates to me that he knows what needs to be done. So surely he's at the stage where he knows that he cannot sit in emotions and he has to do what is right. Then at the end of the E3 2019 trailer, we see a clip of Chief in what looks to be a control room approaching Cortana. What we found on a later date was a voice clip from Cortana that says the following.
I chose you because you were special. Would be perfect together. This is part of me. I don't know why, I don't know how, but it is me.
Now this is speculation. This for me is how I'm going to establish Chief's journey by creating one of two scenarios which I think will play out emotionally in pretty much the same way for the Chief. Scenario 1 is that Cortana in the voice clip is either not the same Cortana and she's come into contact with the Cortana from Halo 5 who's gone mad, or scenario 2, which is Cortana has come into contact with the chip that Chief has provided, it somehow confused her by deactivating a certain part of her and made her see her old self and allowed her to find some resolution in her mind. For either scenario, Chief knows at this point that bad Cortana needs to be taken down, and he's been instructed to provide this chip to her, which in the trailer we can also see by his HUD is also designed to take her out. But what impact does that exactly have on the Chief? Looking at him walking into the control room, he seems to be quite calm in his posture, he's definitely not rushing anywhere, he doesn't look like he's been fighting, and it also looks like he's been teleported from somewhere else. My thoughts now is that he's been called upon by Cortana, but with the assumption that Chief is going through the exception part of his journey, is he willing to lie to her just so he can physically be with her in person to do what needs to be done? Cortana was willing to lock Chief up previously because he would not go through with her plan. She thinks she's doing the right thing and also has become almost a narcissist in doing so. She won't see anybody else's point of view, even from her closest friends that she relies on so much in the past. As such, does Chief lie to her to get to the control room? If so, what has he said? In my opinion, he needs to be accepting of her fate, and he knows that the chip inside his helmet is designed to bring her down, meaning that he's willing to do what's best for the galaxy. But with that in mind, with him knowing what he has to do, what worries me is the impact it might have emotionally on the Chief. Could we see him revert back to depression? Will he be okay with the new Cortana model, even though he said he would not let that happen in Halo 4? Or will this acceptance allow him to move on and find his place back with Blue Team once his journey has come to a resolution? Brohammer will most likely be at his side throughout the whole event, and hopefully he'll help him, but it definitely seems that Chief has a long road ahead, and it's hard to say at this point, but from what little information we have, I think that's the best we can think of so far. But what do you think? Let me know in the comment section down below. How do you think his journey will pan out? My name is Jack Fletcher, and I will see you next time on the one and the only Ultimate Halo.
Subscribe now to Ultimate Halo for more unfriggin' believable Halo content.